This is problem 4.11 from Brigham and Houston, Chapter 4, Brigham and Houston, Fundamentals of Financial Management, Concise, 9th edition. Given a bunch of information and you're asked to calculate the net profit margin and the debt to capital ratio. The debt to capital will be debt divided by debt plus equity, or liabilities and equity. Since the firm only uses debt and common equity, so total assets equal total invested capital, a tortured way of saying what's the debt ratio. All right, Brigham and Houston, I swear to God, this used to be a better book. Oh well. Let's go ahead and solve for this tortured language in the textbook. This is basic DuPont equations. Net profit margin times total asset turnover times equity multiplier equals ROE. So the net profit margin would be net income over sales. So net income over sales, the total asset turnover is sales over assets, and the equity multiplier is assets over equity. Multiply those three together, then what you're left with is net income over equity. All right, net income over sales times sales over assets. Sales drops out, all right? So if you multiply this ratio times this ratio, you get net income over assets. And then if you multiply again times assets, sales over assets times assets over equity, you'd have net income over equity. Okay, so that's the DuPont equations. All right, but our first step here, when you multiply net income over sales times sales over assets, what you have is return on assets. So the product of these two numbers is return on assets. Let me expand this a little bit. So if you have ROA, and then you multiply that times the equity multiplier, alright, net income over assets. So net income over sales times sales over assets equals to net income over assets, the ROA. Multiply that by the equity multiplier, and you have net income over equity. All right, I'm told that this number is 8%. That's given in the problem. I'm told that this number is 4%. That tells me that this has to be 2. 4% times 2 equals 8%. So I have an equity multiplier. I'm told that sales over assets is 1.3, so net profit margin times total asset turnover gives you 4%. The net profit margin had to be 4% divided by 1.3. All right. So there's my profit margin. All right, that's the first part of the problem. Net profit margin is equal to 3.08. I'll use a different color to highlight that that's the answer to the first part. And then we're also asked to calculate the debt to capital ratio, which debt to capital would be given in this particular problem. The assets are equal to liabilities plus equity. All right, so assets are also equal to non-invested capital or working capital, or non-invested capital plus invested capital plus equity. Now we're given in the problem the firm only uses debt and common equity, so total assets equal total invested capital. So there's no non-invested capital. Very unrealistic. So liabilities is what we're going to call that. Assets per dollar equity, there's $2 of assets for every, and those are funded with liabilities and equity. When this says 2, that's $2 of assets for every dollar of equity. That must mean that the liabilities, there must be $1 of liabilities for every dollar of assets as well. All right. So to get the debt ratio, what I want is liabilities divided by assets. That'd be equal to 1/2, which is 50%. All right. Tortured language, but fairly simple problem.